it's my great honor to be able to introduce a man who epitomizes what the Hall of Fame stands for. He's a legend, Kasey Keller.
Good thing I got inducted at the first ballot, or I'd have to change to reading glasses because those are coming soon. So, obviously, what Brian didn't mention is, yes, he didn't score on me in that game, but he did score on me on his debut for Everton, and he did score on me on his debut for Fulham. And luckily, the kids weren't born at that time, so they were still okay with that at that stage. So obviously, thanks, Brian, for the tremendous words. Your friendship with yourself and your family is so dear, and congratulations, Travis. Great job, and Mooch, and was such a great person. And I remember so many times being jet lagged coming from Europe, because normally I'm not a morning person, and Mooch was very much a morning person. So I would be in breakfast just struggling mightily with whatever crossword puzzle, and Mooch would look over my shoulder and just give little hints to me here and there so I could kind of help, because he'd already finished the crossword puzzle 2 hours previously before I got down to breakfast. So I have such fond memories of Mooch, and gone far too young. And Zig, the thing I can say the most about you is I just can't believe you didn't have that red coat 20 years ago for everything you did in this sport. We were together on youth national teams. We played against each other when you were at UCLA and I was at Portland. And then to have the honor to come home and work with you at Seattle was tremendous. So congratulations again. So many people thank, and I have to obviously start with my wife, Kristen, for allowing me to just drag her around Europe for so many years, and to think when she made that commitment to not start a career after college and to follow this guy over to Europe to try to make something happen, and to think that we were there for 17 years was amazing, and thank you so much. I love you dearly. And to my two kids, Cameron and Chloe, to be able to watch you two grow up, and once again, to allow me to drag you around and what you had to go through, moving so many times. And when we moved to play for Seattle, and they started 6th grade in America, and it was their 5th school in their 4th country. And I know how difficult that must have been. And the great children that you were, and I'm even so proud of the just amazing adults that you've become, as Kristen and I sent them off to university this year. So, and then, I think you have to start, as you kind of start this parade of thank yous, you have to start with your parents. And with my father for just instilling such a love of sports and sportsmanship, and thankfully some pretty good genes, which probably helped as well with being able to dive around and make a few of those saves. But then, of course, my mother. I mean, before the term soccer mom was there, I mean, that was my mom. Making sure I wanted for nothing, and when I needed a new pair of cleats, even though we probably couldn't afford them at the time, they showed up, or a pair of gloves that I needed. But the one thing that probably many coaches that I had, many youth coaches, wish was an invention at the time was the GPS system, because my mom got lost to every soccer pitch we ever had to try to find. There was coaches that were hiding players in cars so the referee wouldn't start the game early. Say, we don't have enough players, because my mom was wandering around some backcountry road somewhere trying to find a field up here in Seattle that eventually we found, and fortunately we made those games. But I think as a player, as you're standing up here, as you continue that, to remember, how you got here. I mean, all the coaches along the way, all the teammates along the way that helped, and it starts, at that youth level. And I think back, being a product of Washington State, Youth Soccer Association, and the young influence of a goalkeeping coach early on. And this was a time, there wasn't, these clubs and, sport directors making, six figures to coach your kids. This was just coaches out there doing it because they loved to coach and try to develop young players in a sport they loved. And Rob Walker was a huge influence on my goalkeeping at that stage. My youth coach, Peter Cornell, who kind of brought me in as a member of the family, traveling back and forth from Olympia up to Seattle to play games and be with the state team at different days, and just really giving me my own bedroom in their house to make that little bit easier. Guys like Bobby Howe, Cliff McGrath, just gentlemen who were huge in myself trying to grow up and be this cocky kid growing up on an egg farm in Olympia, to try to make a go. And I mean, my dad being, an American, you heard, so much Travis saying about Mooch and growing up in an immigrant background, learning the game that way. Zig, obviously, with his German heritage through his father. And, my dad wasn't American. I mean, my dad didn't have a passport. My dad didn't it was American sports, and it was that kind of stuff. And I know when I started giving up the other sports, and my father didn't quite, kind of understand, why are you choosing a sport? I know your dream from all along was to be a professional athlete, and you're choosing a sport that there's no league in this country. What are you doing? And here's the cocky farm kid, from Olympia, Washington. I said, well, I need to go to Europe, and preferably go to England. You talk about the arrogance of professional athletes. I didn't realize probably 15 years after my career started that I was the first American to play on an American passport in England. And here's this 16-year-old cocky farm kid from Olympia, Washington, telling his father, oh, it's no big deal. I'll give up these other sports because I'm going to go play professionally in Europe and preferably England. So it worked out pretty well, Dad. So thank you. I somehow figured that out. And along that route, probably the best decision I made, and the decision that probably, take away the life and, my wife and that kind of stuff. But the best decision I probably made in directing my career was choosing to go to University of Portland and playing for Clive Charles. And Clive, who passed away several years ago, missed dearly, and his influence on myself in going from being that cocky farm boy coming into college and having conversations and preparing me to go to Europe. Because I think if I hadn't had that preparation, there's a very good chance that I wouldn't be standing here right now. And I owe Clive a huge for giving me the tools I needed to go over and succeed in Europe when people would look at you like, you're an American. What are you doing here? Why are you over here trying to play this sport? You should be hitting a baseball or something. And Clive was the huge foundation that got that started. And I have a big debt of gratitude to the University of Portland family and for giving me that foundation to go over to Europe. And then it gets into the professional side of stuff. So I go over to this small little club, or this not necessarily a small little club, but this club called Millwall in southeast London. And I had no idea. Once again, I'm an American kid. I didn't know what Millwall was. And I had a Scottish professor at University of Portland. And I had to take some classes early because unfortunately we lost to UCLA in the playoffs and zig, and and so I was going over to Millwall. And the Scottish professor says to me, he says, "Oh, yeah," I said, "I need to take my finals early. I'm gonna get on a plane. I got to go over. I have a trial for a team in England." He goes, "Oh, that's great. What team are you going to?" I said, "I'm going to Millwall." And this look on his face, this just aghast look. He's like, "They kill people there." And I'm like, I'm kind of not quite sure what I'm getting myself into. And so, but very fortunately enough, it's interesting how things come full circle. The first manager that signs me at Millwall, a man by the name of Bruce Rioch, finished his career with the Seattle Sounders when the NASL folded. And I was too young. Bruce didn't know me as a player, but what he did is he respected the individuals that were here. And when those individuals said to him, "There's this American kid that you need to have a look at," and it wasn't, no, Americans can't play soccer. He goes, "I was there. I coached a little bit after I retired with the American kids. I know they're better than people are giving them credit for." And Bruce gave me my first chance to prove myself in England. I played a little over 4 seasons for Millwall. I played 202 games. I couldn't have asked for a better foundation to start my career than in the English Championship, and I owe a huge credit to Bruce Rioch for giving me that opportunity and taking a little risk on an American kid. And then I kind of had my first opportunity in the Premier League with Leicester City at a team that was supposed to be relegated by Christmas. And we finished in 8th place and won the League Cup and had a great run and had a fantastic time with Martin O'Neill and at Leicester, finishing in the top half of the Premier League 3 years in a row. And then I kind of had a little opportunity to go play in Spain and be the first American to play in the top flight in Spain. And I just, thinking about all the opportunities that I was given and all the people who were so influential in allowing me to get those chances, and Wande Ramos for giving me that opportunity. And I just kept getting drawn back to England, and Glenn Hoddle bringing me back to play at Spurs and playing 100 games at Spurs in a row, and every game, Cup League for a couple seasons. This whole time, my family's dragging them around. We're going to this thing, we're going here, we're going to Spain, and then back to England. And then eventually, you're a professional athlete. Things kind of don't go necessarily the way you want them to go. And to have that support of your family when you get a phone call one day and the kids are at a birthday party and they're at this swimming pool and they're swimming around and we're going to pick them up, and I get a phone call and it's a Dutch prefix, and I walk out of the swimming pool and I come back 10 minutes later and Dick Advocat called and said, "We want to bring you to Borussia Mönchengladbach. And you got to tell your family, guess what, guys, we're moving to Germany tomorrow." And everybody just, like I said, without that support, I just would not have had that opportunity. And so I have a couple fantastic seasons in Germany to be able to be a part of a club like Gladbach during the World Cup in 2006 and kind of the excitement that was going on in Germany. And and then we go back to my good friend, Mr. McBride, and I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do. We're thinking about retiring and maybe just moving back to the U.S. and not figuring, kind of figuring out what we're going to do. And Brian gets a pretty bad knee injury at Fulham, and I give him a call and just saying, "Brian, so sorry to hear about your knee." And we start talking over and over, and then I kind of just offhand mention of Brian, "What's going on with your goalkeeping situation at Fulham?" He's like, "Why?" I said, "No, why? It's just a question." And he goes, "Well, would you come?" I said, "That wasn't what I was asking. I'm just making conversation." He goes, "Well, I'm going into the club tomorrow. I have to go in, and I'm telling the club that you're available." Okay, Brian. Okay, do what you got to do. Well, and the influence that Brian had with Fulham, because that day he went in, I had a phone call from the goalkeeping coach, who was a friend of mine, an hour later from the head coach, and an hour later from the club secretary with the offer. And on the next day, I was on the plane to Fulham and was able to finish my English career a year playing with Brian. Brian was able to heal from his injury. I had probably sustained the worst injury in my career. I tore a bicep tendon, had 4 months rehabbing. I got fit at the same time. We came back into the side and provided one of the best relegation escapes in Premier League history together, along with Carlos Bocanegra, Eddie Johnson. It was a special time, and a Clint Dempsey as well, who was in that squad, to a group of Americans able to, who would have thought when I first went over to England in 1991 that 5 Americans in the Premier League would have helped keep a team in the Premier League, and it just shows what U.S. soccer has been able to do. And then I get this interesting opportunity, thanks to 2 gentlemen who are in this room, Joe Roth and Adrian Hanauer, who are able to put something together here in Seattle that I think so many of us felt was capable for so many years, and just could not understand how MLS had kind of skipped this opportunity in the Northwest, and the perfect storm comes together with Adrian and Joe and Todd Lewicki and Drew and you have to throw Mr. Allen in there, and what the Seahawks were able to do for us, and for myself at that point of my career to be able to come home after 17 years in Europe, and not just come home to America, but actually come home to the Northwest, and be a part of something that has really revolutionized MLS. And I start with a coach that signs me, who was a Seattle Sounder in England, and I'm able to come home and finish my career as a player, and then be given the opportunity to transition into broadcasting, with the hometown Sounders. And thank you so much, Joe and Adrian, for basically allowing me that opportunity to bring my whole career full circle and back home. And then we get to the point, throughout this whole journey, there's this constant factor, and that constant factor is U.S. soccer. In 1984-85, I kind of started my career with U.S. soccer. I missed out on a U16 World Cup by a coin toss. So it didn't start necessarily as meteoric as I kind of hoped it would have. But I think if you want to move forward, there's going to be setbacks, and you just have to go with it and go stronger. And then you think of where U.S. soccer has come in that time period from there to now. I was traveling to Youth World Cup in '87. My journey to Chile went from Seattle to Denver to Miami to Rio to Buenos Aires to Santiago to Antofagasta, Chile. And by the time I retired from the national team, we were hooking up our Xbox systems to play Halo on the private jet over the TV screens in the plane. And to think that we hadn't qualified for a World Cup in 40 years, and with the help of the Bob Ganslers, the Steve Sampsons, the Ziggy Schmidts, the Bruce Arenas, and now the Bob Bradleys, and now the Jurgen Klinsmann. And that whole time, that first trip in 1984-85, there was one guy when we sat down, and because we're missing a lot of school. I missed 84 days of my senior year of high school traveling with youth national teams. But there was one guy when I sat down into a room when I was missing school who had to help me with my homework, and that was Mr. Sunil Gulati. And I'm sure Sunil, after he helped me with my homework, went, I sure hope to God this guy's a good athlete. And hopefully I've been repaying the national team back from that point on, because Sunil pretty much pointed out early on that I needed to be a good athlete. So, but look, you don't get to this point without so much help, and so much help from, first of all, your family, first of all, your friends, to have that support system, to have great coaches, to have great teammates, to have great friends, to be able to play with guys like, to be coached by my friends back in the day. I come back from my friends who I played with and then be able to play with guys like Tommy Dutra to coach me later in my career. So cool. And you just can't get to where you're going without having so much support. And thank you, so many people, U.S. soccer, coaches, players, family, everybody, because without you, I wouldn't be here today. So thank you so much.
Thank you.